O heavy ignorance, thou praisest the worst best. But what praise couldst thou bestow on a deserving woman indeed, one that in the authority of her merit did justly put on the vouch of very malice itself? So Desdemona says, what if there really was a girl that was worthy of your praise? Then what would you have to say for her? And here's what Iago replies with. As I read through, of course, you want to take note of the couplets that are being represented here. So take a look at the end rhyme. She that was ever fair and never proud, had tongue at will, and yet was never loud, never lacked gold, and yet went never gay, fled from her wish, and yet said, now I may. She that being angered, her revenge being nigh, bade her wrong stay, and her displeasure fly. She that in wisdom never was so frail, to change the cod's head for the salmon's tail. She that could think and ne'er disclose her mind, see suitors following, and not look behind. She was a wight, if ever such wight were. Take a look at some of the footnotes. So he's kind of describing the perfect woman, I guess, in his case, at least at this point. And he doesn't finish his sentence. So when he's describing the woman, he stops, and then Desdemona says, to what? To suckle fools and chronicle small beer. So pretty much Iago says, even if there was a woman that fit all of this criteria and she was the quote-unquote perfect woman, it wouldn't matter because all women turn out the same. And this is how Iago truly sees women. So to describe him as misogynistic, definitely. I would have that down as a characteristic of Iago. That's how he sees women. And unfortunately, but truthfully, Iago's perspective on women was much more common than that of Othello, or I guess the way that Cassio sees Desdemona, not so common either. I don't want to put Cassio in the same category of Othello for how he treats women because we haven't seen how Cassio treats Bianca, but that's coming. O most lame and impotent conclusion! Do not learn of him, Amelia, though he be thy husband. How say you, Cassio? Is he not a most profane and liberal counselor? Take a look at the footnote. So the footnote might not help you, but that just means disrespectful and sexually unrestrained. So she's asking Cassio's opinion. Do you agree with him? Is this how you feel? And he said, he speaks home, madam. You may relish him more in the soldier than in the scholar. So take a look at the footnote for Cassio's reply. And notice how Cassio says that he's just kind of speaking like a soldier would speak instead of someone who was wise. Cassio and Desdemona stand together, conversing intimately, so they're standing closely together. Notice that we have our first aside here with Iago, where he's not speaking so Cassio or Desdemona or anyone else around him can hear what he's saying at this point. It's merely for the audience. So we get to see what Iago's truly thinking, truly feeling at this point. He takes her by the palm, I well said, he of course being Cassio, her of course being Desdemona. I well said, whisper, with as little a web as this will I ensnare as great a fly as Cassio. I smile upon her, do I will give thee in thine own courtship. You say true, 'tis so indeed. If such tricks as these strip you out of your lieutenantry, it had been better you had not kissed your 3 fingers so oft, which now again you are most apt to play the Surin. Very good, well kissed, an excellent courtesy. 'Tis so indeed. Yet again your fingers to your lips, would they were clyster pipes for your sake. There's a trumpet from within. The more I know his trumpet, so Othello's ship has arrived. Let's go ahead and flip back to page 77 at the bottom, because there's some stuff that we need to mark that you're going to have to come back to later. Of course, mark the fact that's in an aside, but also when Iago says, with as little a web as this will I ensnare as great a fly as Cassio, go ahead and mark that. It's a pretty significant metaphor, and we're going to see it come up again and again throughout the rest of Othello, where he's comparing Cassio's gestures to a web. Essentially, he's going to create his plan, and his plan is going to be the web. And the fly is Cassio. We saw flies referenced in Act 1, Scene 1. So we see that coming up again. Then take a look at the footnotes if you haven't already before we turn the page. Okay, flip the page and then take a look at some of the footnotes on that page. So another courtesy of the time that we don't really have in our culture, our society anymore, was that a man would take a woman's hand and he would kiss his own fingers. And that was supposed to be some kind of a sign of courtesy. And that's what Cassio is doing with Desdemona at this point. And Iago is saying, yeah, like keep doing that, keep doing that. It's helping out my plan. And remember, his plan is to convince Othello that Desdemona has been sleeping with Cassio. So the fact that they're speaking so closely and intimately at this point is working for his plan. And Iago says, good, keep kissing your fingers and making it look like what you're making it look like. But you check the footnotes, and when he says clyster pipes, those are tubes used for enemas and douches. So he's saying, that's pretty much the good it's going to come from you doing all of this. Cassio speaks. "'Tis truly so. Let's meet him and receive him. Lo, where he comes." Othello and his attendants enter onto the scene. Othello says, "Oh, my fair warrior." And he is, of course, referring to Desdemona. That's the first person he wants to address. Desdemona cries out, "My dear Othello." And here, when Othello's getting ready to speak, you want to mark this as more characterization of Othello and how we see him treating Desdemona. You especially want to compare it to the earlier portion of the scene where Iago is speaking to Desdemona and Emilia, and you see how he treats the women. So we have a nice juxtaposition within the same scene here. And Othello says, "It gives me wonder great as my content to see you here before me. O my soul's joy, if after every tempest come such calms, may the winds blow till they have wakened death, and let the laboring bark climb hills of seas, Olympus high, and duck again as low as hells from heaven." Hells from heaven, surely you're marking that for light and dark imagery. "If it were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy, for I fear my soul hath her content so absolute, that not another comfort like to this succeeds an unknown fate." So Othello is overcome with joy. He has all of this praise for Desdemona. He's excited to see her. Not only does it say something about Othello that he says these things to Desdemona, the way he treats his wife, you have to imagine that Montano's on the scene, Cassio's on the scene, Iago, all of these people are on the scene, all the people that work underneath Othello, and it doesn't matter to him that all these people are around. He still treats Desdemona in the same manner. He highly respects her. He even calls her his fair warrior when he first sees her. Desdemona replies, "The heavens forbid, but that our loves and comforts should increase even as our days do grow." Desdemona mentions heavens again, and you're going to see this later on more so, but you can go ahead and start marking it. Anytime we see the heavens mentioned in reference to Desdemona, or Desdemona says the heavens, Desdemona is supposed to represent everything that is pure and innocent in the world. And so, of course, she's going to be referenced with heaven a lot. Othello says, "Amen to that, sweet powers. I cannot speak enough of this content. It stops me here. It is too much of joy. And this, the greatest discords be." They kiss in front of everyone. He's not ashamed. "That ere our hearts shall make." So he's speaking of their love for one another. Iago says in an aside, you are well tuned now, but I'll set down the pegs that make this music as honest as I am." So even though we only have 2.5 lines here, there's some stuff that you want to mark. Of course, Iago is saying as honest as I am. Take a look at the footnote. "For all my supposed honesty." Of course, everyone thinks that he's honest, but he's really not. So you want to go ahead and mark that. Take a look at the metaphor that's being created here. And you can use the footnotes. He's basically creating the metaphor of their love to an instrument. So Iago claims that he's going to set down the pegs. Iago will untune, tune, or destroy their relationship. He's going to be in control of the instrument. That's how he sees it. And this is starting another motif that you're going to see again later, just like ensnaring as great a fly as Cassio that we saw earlier. It's going to come up again. Othello says, "Come, let us to the castle. News, friends. Our wars are done. The Turks are drowned. So just as everyone had suspected, the Turkish fleet was destroyed. All the men have drowned. So there's no more threat of a war. So it's time to celebrate. How does my old acquaintance of this isle? So he's asking Montano how he is. Honey, you shall be well desired in Cyprus. Talking to Desdemona, of course. I have found great love amongst them. Oh, my sweet, I prattle out of fashion, and I dote in mine own comforts. Take a look at the prattle out of fashion incoherently, like he has so many great things to say about her. I prithee, good Iago, go to the bay and disembark my coffers. So go to the bay and pick up all of my luggage. Bring thou the master to the citadel. He is a good one, and his worthiness does challenge much respect. Come, Desdemona, once more, well met at Cyprus. So when he says he is a good one and his worthiness does challenge much respect, he's talking about Iago at this point, and he even says good Iago. So you want to mark those lines together. It shows how much he trusts and he truly likes Iago, so we get the dramatic irony that is present here. Exit Othello and Desdemona and pretty much everyone except for Iago and Rodrigo. So if you don't notice, if you want to go ahead and mark the narrative structure here, where we have a lot of people that are on the scene, and then at the end of the scene we have Iago and Rodrigo talking, where we get the idea of what their plan is going to be. And then of course we have to have Iago alone to see what the plan really is, since he's not going to be 100% Iago. He isn't going to be 100% honest with Rodrigo, since Iago is only working for himself here.